What's happening, people? I've been pondering death, the phenomena, the subject, the concern for the majority of my life. And after a lot of debate, a lot of investigation, reading, and consideration, I have recently come to the conclusion that it does not exist. Death is not real. I don't believe that anyone is ever truly and permanently dead like we normally think they are. Not if we consider life an experience, as I've routinely and repeatedly said that we should on this channel. I think it's the best definition, and I'll double down on that point in just a second, why life should be thought of like that. But if we think of life as an experience, without going through all the points in this video, up front, I think we can quickly see why no one is ever truly dead. Because if it is nothing more than the totality of the suite of qualia that make us, what things smell like, what things feel like, what things look like, sound like, exactly to us, if we can imagine that being the totality of our being, then by some stretch of the imagination, at some point in the universe's future, in our galaxy, our universe's timeline, that some being, some mind, some entity will be able to reform, restructure, re-elicit, or reconstitute the experience of us, even if it's just reforming our body physically. If that's all it takes to make us alive, consciousness and everything is materiality, then that's possible by practical means, even though we can't do it. But if it's something more, then still some being may have some insight on how to elicit the response of us, even if it's in a simulation, even if it's computational based. Our reality is now computational based in our bodies. If we're able to experience life as we know it, then we are alive. It does not matter the essence of our reality. If we are having an experience that we would call us, we are alive. That's all that matters. So you can see that no one is ever truly dead, because even if there's a billion or trillion or quadrillion year span between the last moment you experienced and the next one, as long as you would say that this is still you and you feel like you, or you feel like you're alive, then you're alive. And if you're not aware of that gap, then there's no concern to you. If you're ignorant totally to any gap and temporal gap in your experience, and it didn't happen, and you go on living as if everything is good. And I think we should think of life as experience, just to double down on this again, because if you look at life as experience, then it underpins and it can cover, it's the most broad and universally applicable definition. It can cover any conceivable notion or description of life we can imagine, whether it be higher dimensional, whether it be non-biological, whether it be computational based, once again, simulated life, or whether it be holographic life, inorganic, silica based. It doesn't matter. If it's capable of experience, if it's capable of having some awareness of something, then I think we should say it's a living thing. I think it is a living thing because there is something of concern from its vantage point, no matter how minimal that concern is. Just like there's something of concern from our vantage point, no matter how minimal someone else or something else may say we are, or our experience or our suffering or our awareness is. Now, obviously, we place a high value on that, so I think we should place a high value on all other experiences. That's just my opinion. But if we think of life like this, then we can see that we've kind of socially been primed for life being experienced for a long time through religion. For much of civilization's history, we have thought of and conceived of pretty much all of civilization's history, maybe all of the majority of humanity's history. We've thought of and conceived of extra dimensional realms, afterlife scenarios where we exist here, and then the physical form gives out, it grows weary, it goes kaput, it ends. And then we continue on in some other realm, somehow, some way. Now, obviously, we are not transferring our physical body into the next realm, so there has to be some support, some hope, some thread of continuity from this realm to the next. And I think we have that in continuity of experience. Now, we may have traditionally called this continuity soul, energy, some thread tying us that we don't understand, some type of energy, some type of consciousness, whatever you want to call it, mind that ties us from this realm to the next. But those are just words to describe things we don't understand. I think no matter what, we have to bank on a consistent experience being had from here to there, or at least a comparable experience, or we have died and a new thing has begun. If we don't feel like us, if we're unaware of us, if it's nothing like it is to be us in that realm, then we are not alive anymore. And I think when we look at our youth, our childhood, then I think we know that this is likely the case. I think we know that we've pretty much abandoned the need, the desire for physical continuity, for physical consistency over time, and we've adopted inadvertently and unwittingly a notion of us as just being an experience over time. We are not the same physical bodies at all. We are completely different, pretty much, save for a few areas. But when we look at the first person vantage point, the first person's projective vantage point of us, what it feels like to be us once again, that is largely consistent. Yes, it's been flavored by life and happenings and circumstances and doings. But for the most part, if you strip all of that away, we are largely the same, and it feels largely the same to be us as it did when we were at 10, as at 20, at 30 and 40 and 50 and so on. It's just flavored by life experience. So we've been on this notion for a while. We just haven't accepted it consciously and cognitively up front, broadly, because it ruins personal identity. It ruins the ego. It destroys the ego when we give up the boldness, the bigness, the attachment to this physical form, save for something that is indifferent to its essence, its physical or non-physical constituent nature, right? So when we look at life this way, I think we have to look at the afterlife, any present realm, any other conceivable reality, any other time period that we exist as being nothing but determined and dependent upon the experience of us being consistent. And if that's the case, then we are alive. It does not matter if it's drastically different from this realm to another realm, or this time period to another time period. Then we've obviously ceased to be, and another thing is begun being. Even if it's in this physical form, if today we feel like this and tomorrow we wake up and we feel like a totally different person, then if we're unaware of the original, if we're unaware of what we were, or if we don't identify with that, then pretty much we have ceased to be, and another thing is begun being. Now, we can say religion doesn't really have a good handle on this reality. We can say that spirituality's things are not rigid and rational and testable enough to be faithful arbiters of truth. And we turn to science. And I think even when we turn to science and things like pop culture and media that are influenced heavily by science, like Star Trek, I think we see support for death not being a thing that is an absolute physical state. It is a experiential state that is never absolute. It is in a superposition of indeterminacy. We are neither, when we die physically, we are neither alive, clearly, because we aren't experiencing, but we're neither dead. We're not dead either, because the experience of us is still potentially havable. We can still conceive of it being had. So you cannot write us off permanently, forever, or at all. So when you look at Star Trek and you look at their suicide boxes or teleportation machines, as I just saw a very good example of this in Star Trek Picard just a few days ago, maybe a week ago, on an episode where they had a whole bank of teleportation machines and people walking on and off like it was no big deal. And what we see here is, in this world, people have given up physical consistency, any attachment to this spatial, this local, spatial, and physical form, in favor of just a continuity of experience from the first person's subjective conscious vantage point, our awareness of our reality. As long as that's being had, we're good. People step on those teleportation machines. They're disassembled physically. They're destroyed. And they're reassembled. They're not beamed. Their matter and energy isn't beamed across the universe, across the planet. They are destroyed and they're made anew. And when they're made anew, they walk off the platform and they're fine. Everything is good. They do not experience a temporal gap or lapse in their life whatsoever. And from their, I guess you would say, as far as they're concerned and everyone else around them is concerned, life goes on. There's nothing to be concerned with. There's no issue here. There's nothing to be had. Now, if you're holding on to physical continuity, if you're holding on to spatial continuity, I cannot jump from here to there because I need to explain that. If you're holding on to physical continuity where I need this to be consistent, the actual labeled components to be here and also there, then you are not going to get on a teleportation machine. You're not going to suicide yourself. But if you give up on that, and I think we should, it took me a while to come to this. It took me a while to be comfortable with losing the attachment and identification with my physical form and really adopting a favorable perspective of my experience being all there is and all there needs to be. It took a while to do that, but once I was able to do that, then I see I'm still going to be hesitant about getting into a teleportation machine, but I see this is no longer being foolish and philosophically, just reckless. I don't see teleportation or suicide boxes being philosophically reckless anymore. I see them as potentially just ingenious ways of travel if they are possible, and I can stomach getting on one. The first trip may be a doozy, but we all have hurdles to overcome and surmount, right? But if you look, abandon Star Trek and get past the media and onto the hard science. If you look at the ever-rating interpretation of quantum mechanics, the many worlds interpretation, now we're talking about in Star Trek, we're talking about what could easily be, just one more example there, you could get into the disembarking teleportation suicide box, and that thing could malfunction and it could be decommissioned. You could be put in a warehouse for 100 years. You could walk off. It could be reanimated. Somebody could buy it, put it in a museum, and it could be accidentally restarted or re-energized. And you could easily be reformed, reconstituted, made anew. And 100 years later from the moment that you walked onto that platform, and you could walk off in some warehouse and feel exactly like you. Now, obviously your world has changed, so you're aware of a temporal gap, and that will throw you for a loop. That will be difficult to come to terms with. But if none of that was possible, if none of that happened, if some alien paused human civilization, moved our galaxy, reformed whatever the heck, I'm not going to go too deep into that. I can go pretty far there. But if some alien performed some magic to us, physical, practical reality, moving of planets and whatever, to make us believe that no time had passed, but it had actually been 100 years, and everyone on Earth was in agreement with this, and the stars and all the constellations and everything else was good, and to our measurements and to our instruments and all of our measurements, they were all fine. Then we'd be ignorant, so there would be no issue here. So it's all about continuity of experience, not temporal or physical continuity or spatial continuity. Now, once again, getting into the hard science, like ever-rating interpretation of quantum mechanics, I think what you have is not just a temporal or spatial issue. I think you have an exclusivity issue. I think what you have in quantum mechanics is an exclusivity issue, because I think it's something like 10 to the 10 to the 34 number of universes or branches that this universe has undergone since the beginning of the universe. And that's a lot. And that means there is millions, if not billions and quadrillions of versions of you having a roughly, if not pragmatically and practically identical experience at the exact same moment. So in this sense, you aren't dead because the experience of you is being had somewhere, likely better in many areas, and it will go on even if you die. So even if in this universe we say this universe will never be again, this universe will never have the same experiences again, well, that may not be true in these other universes. There may be beings that are capable of reforming you. So the experience of you is not only not exclusive to this universe, but it may not be exclusive to one point in these other universes. It's maybe in millions of universes, and in those millions of universes, the experience can be had multiple times by some conceivable stretch of the imagination. Now, it won't be through human means, by our current understanding of our biology, the world, physics, chemistry, what have you, because we can't reanimate a body once again. But by some stretch of the imagination, the experience of us is capable of being had multiple times. So when you give up this exclusivity of experience, because you cannot say that identical body, that identical conscious state, that identical memory, save for an electron energy state being higher in this branched universe as opposed to this one, if that's the only thing that's different, then you're pretty much having the exact same experience. From your perspective, there is no difference. So you can't say that's not you. That is you, and this is you, and they're all you. So what we have, instead of a flame flickering on and flickering off in a single universe, what we have is a roaring inferno of you, of the experience of you, rolling and rolling and rolling. And as one gets extinguished over time, they slowly trickle down. But when you talk about there being no true death, the experience of you is likely to be had to the end of the universe, because by some conceivable stretch of the imagination, once again, in one of these universes, by some entity, some human being by some confluence of events, some chance circumstances, a human being may be able to live until the end of the universe's lifespan. I don't know how it's possible, but if you give it enough chances, it's possible that it could happen. So the flame of you may go on indefinitely in one shape, one form, or another. And it's likely to go on way past your particular lifeline and lifespan because of just the totality of flames that are rolling. The odds that you'll be the one that lives the longest are very, very low. So the experience of you will be had far past your life. So death is not, it's exclusive potentially for a period of time in this universe for the people around you, but it's not exclusive at all because as soon as you die, well, around the world, around the multiverse, millions and billions of you are waking up and stretching and looking at the sun and grabbing some coffee or some orange juice or something and starting a great day. So when we think about when we think about people being over, things ending, that being it, it's true. For us, it will be it. That's the last we'll have of that likely. But we shouldn't weep in the sense that this is a irrevocable loss because it's not necessarily irrevocable. We could potentially recover and likely will at some point, even if it isn't us. Someone will likely recover if they see us fitting and worthy of knowing in that way. Recover whatever information is needed to elicit and reconstitute the experience of us. So I think death is not what we've always thought it was. If we think of ourselves as experience, death is not even a reality anymore. It is a concern for a short period of time, for a human lifespan, maybe even for our species. From that perspective, from that time frame, many things will die and never be seen again. But over a long enough time frame, it's possible. It's not likely, but it's possible that the experience of us or anything else could be remade and had again. And if that's the case, that thing is no longer dead. That thing is now decohered into a determined, specific state of being alive. It is no longer not dead and not alive. It is now definitely alive if the experience is being had. And that means that we may live forever. That means that at the very minimum, we will never be dead until this universe and all universes capable of housing an experience like us are over. And even if that happens, there still may be some mind that's capable of knowing and supporting the experience of us in some ways, some shape or form. Gets into some religious and spiritual territory, I know. Gets into religious and spiritual territory, I know. But when you go deep enough, it gets like that. Things get a little hazy, a little fuzzy. They get philosophical, and first they start practical, rigid, rational. Then they become philosophical, a little bit more loose, nebulous, but still bounded and defined by terms and systems of thought. And then they become spiritual, and they're completely subjective. They're somewhat agreeable and shareable and overlapping, but ultimately they are individual understandings and in worlds and realms. So, for lack of a better word, spirituality ultimately becomes an individual understanding, an individual reality that is comparable to others, but is not necessarily arrivable through rational and practical means. You cannot bring someone to your spiritual or philosophical understanding like you can a scientific understanding. But that's what I have to say about that. No one ever truly dies. Death is not what we've always thought it was. It's a concern. It's a concern for human life perpetually. For the end of the species, to the end of the species, it's likely that we're going to be worried about losing people. We're going to be worried about our life, especially when people that are globally famous and relatively healthy and young die sudden and tragic deaths. We start to question things. We start to wonder, what is this all about? What's going to happen to us? What comes after this? And I can't say for certain what comes after this. I have my hunches, my intuitions, and I've, experienced some things, induced and non-induced. So I have some ideas, but I can't ever say for certain what comes after this. But one thing that I do know is that it's not nothing. It may be no thing for a long time, but that's still an experience. So I don't necessarily know what comes after this, but I do know that whatever we are, whatever this experience is, why ever we're here, it's never an absolute and complete done deal. We may be, again, at least the experience of us may be had in some shape, some form, in some reality, some simulation, some other conception of reality. We don't know why, when, how, or even if, but we do know that we can never count the experience of us out. We can never count life out. We can never count anyone out. We know that it's always possible. We know that the potential is always there. So instead of thinking about death being the end, I think we should think of it more as a pause on life. For now, you cease to be. You had a good time. You may be again. You may be again at some point in the future. You may be again in many other places currently. You may be currently still remaining. We just cannot access you. So there's some loss from a subjective and isolated standpoint, but if you broaden your perspective, if you broaden your understanding, if you broaden your view, there's hope for someone going on. There's hope for someone not necessarily being over forever. And even if that's in another realm, if that's in another higher dimensional, perspective or something like this, some ascended perspective, as long as there's a consistency of experience, that person is still alive. As long as there's some recognition of a them, that person is still alive. And that's our hope. That's where we have our our bastion for life, in my opinion. But that's just my thought. I think that it scares us. It scares us because we don't know what happens. But what I do think we can do is use logic, use reason, and use our intuition and our experiences, our understanding, our feeling, and rationality to put a few things to bed. And that's the permanent dissolution of you and the end of you forever. So if that helps to bring some solace to your life, to bring some comfort and some peace that you're never absolutely over, that no one is ever absolutely over, I'm glad. If it doesn't, I'm sorry, there may be none for you, other than your own route, your own means and methods. But it's very difficult to wrap your mind. It's very difficult to let go of the physical attachment, the physical identification with this being the end. And if this isn't like this is, then I'm over. But that's a limited view, in my opinion. All I need personally, once again, is to be having an experience of existence roughly similar to the one that I'm having. And I will check that box on, thank you, I'm alive. Even it doesn't have to be very similar. Just give me a close approximation to this each morning and I'm going to be good. So let me know what you think about this video. Hopefully you liked it. I know this style is a shift from the typical video, but I want to do this. I want to have longer conversations. I want to have longer discussions about deep topics like this so I can cover things in a more free-flowing format. And I think sometimes story-based things and conversationally based things are easier to interpret, to understand, and to more entertaining in a sense than just straight information and knowledge. So I like to mix it up a little bit. So I hope you enjoy this. And if you did, let me know in the comment section below if you have any questions or comments, if you have any disagreements, any pushback, any issue with what I said here about death not being a permanent reality. Once again, I'm not trying to upset anyone that's lost a loved one recently. I've lost people myself. I think many of us have, especially by the time we get to be middle-aged or what have you. I'm not trying to upset anyone. It's just a philosophical and personal perspective that I think is pretty reasonable and pretty justifiable from rational, logical, and subjective means, intuitive means. So if you have an issue with that, let me know. We can have a discussion about it below. Or if you believe your comment or your question's too private or not directly pertinent to this video, send it to me at questions@lexbenjamin.com and I will read it there and respond there or in a video format or some other format. So once again, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I will see you on the next one. You have a great day. Take care. And one more later. Bye.